the Book Baron. Welcome in, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about some underrated books, some underrated dark romances, some hidden gems. Yes, these bad boys have under 1,000 reviews on Goodreads. I have done the work for you. I have sifted through all the stinkers and I've found you some gems. Some of these are books that I've been talking about a lot and have been loving this year. Some of these are some all-time favorites from last year because we got some new friends that have joined us. I see you, you little freaks. Hi, welcome. Where did you come from? Not the point. I figured you probably haven't heard about these because I talked about them like a year ago. Before I start, I'm going to preface this video with two things. One, I know the lighting's garbage. I'm so sorry. It is rainy season in Seattle. It's so gray. I'm hoping to get another light, but I got one baby light and hopefully it's doing something. Why did I hold up another finger? This is still the same point. Okay, number two, wasn't able to do a great outline for this video. A lot of this is going to be off the cuff because I have the worst cramps right now. I am so miserable. If I come off not quite as chipper as normal, that's what's happening. Also, if I'm not as articulate, hopefully editing can fix it. Without further ado, let's just jump into things, shall we? So the first book I'm going to recommend is technically a series. It starts with Counts of Eight. The series is The Four Families. It's by Brynn Ford. This has 3 core books in the series, and then it's got 1 spin-off about another couple. We'll just talk about the core series. So what is this about? Anya, and she is serving the Four Families, hence the series name. Basically what the Four Families is, it's like an alliance of 4 organized crime families. They have some sort of an alliance. They have quarterly meetings, and Anya is a ballerina, and she she's forced to serve as their entertainment dancing ballet, because she's a ballerina. You're doing great, honey. The man that captured her is the head of one of these families, and he is like so cruel, so sadistic. I think he's in Russia. So adding to the ambiance. And Anya has really given up hope that she's ever going to escape. She's even danced with a number of different male dancers in her time, and they have not lived up to expectations. They've been let go. And that is all until they bring her Ezra, and he is now captured and forced to be her new partner. So she's actually tasked with trying to break him down and break him in, because not only does she need to break him in because he was like snatched from the real world and now he's got to be doing this, which no one wants to be doing, but also she has to train him in ballet as well because he's a contemporary dancer. If you know anything about dance, those aren't really that similar styles. Here's the problem though. Ezra, unlike her other partners, is not breaking. He's a great dancer though, so that's a bonus. That's nice. One last thing to worry about. Not only is he not breaking, he kind of sees what's going on. He sees the pain that Anya is in. He realizes she's also a victim, and so he starts becoming protective of her. He starts really caring about her. He starts giving her a will to live. She's wanting to resist more. This is very, very dangerous in this house. 1, you don't want to form bonds that can be used against you. And 2, you want to do what you're told here because the consequences could literally be your life. This, I will warn you, the first half of it moves kind of slow. You feel a little bit almost like you don't know what the plot is for a second, or you kind of like feel a little bit distant from the plot. You don't feel like you're making a lot of progress. You don't really feel like you know what's going on. We're laying a foundation, a very necessary foundation. And it's still really interesting because you are learning a ton. You're learning so much. You're getting to know your characters really, really well here. The second half, that's where the good stuff happens. That's where the relationship starts building. That's when you start realizing how much they see each other and they care more about protecting the other person than themselves. It's such a pure love. And it's so rare because they're in this environment where everyone's out for themselves, and to have someone that just sees them, and especially when you're talking about a really unpredictable, violent environment, to just have one bit of reprieve, magic. Next up, we have the Irreparable duet, which starts with Irreparable Damage, and this is by Sam Mariano. This is about Willow. She's the illegitimate daughter of a Chicago mafia boss. He's not really in her life. She actually lives with her moms in the suburbs and focused on high school stuff and like trying to get into college. Like those are her concerns. She's not in the mafia life. This is not a mafia book. However, his world does encroach on hers, unfortunately, and around her 18th birthday, she ends up getting taken, and that's how she ends up meeting a PI by the name of Ethan Wilde. So how did he get thrown in the mix? So he has been tasked with, he's trying to rescue this missing girl. So he has to go undercover, right? He has to disguise himself, and part of that involves, unfortunately, proving his loyalties to this nasty, nasty group of men. They are very violent, very sadistic, And he needs to prove that he is just as depraved as they are. He doesn't have a lot of options here, right? In order for his plan to succeed, in order to keep himself and this girl alive and get her extracted, he has to go with it. He has to prove himself. Unfortunately, there's some collateral damage in the mix. He feels responsible for trying to repair some of this damage because honestly, he feels like a piece of shit. He's now questioning, how good of a guy is he? He got this girl out, but at what cost? So this starts off high action, very engaging, and then kind of slows down because we have to deal with the emotional fallout of that initial sequence of events. And the repercussions, they're devastating. The last half, it's all about the hero and heroine coming together, kind of similar to Cultivate. That last half is where the magic is. Because in an attempt for these two to heal, they get messy, messy, messy. And they arguably cause more damage. They are trying to be mature about things. There's something so magical about people who are trying not to be messy, but they keep getting messier. Also, Sam Mariano does a great job of writing heroines that way. I will warn you, this is in third person. I guess the book would be here. This is in third person. It does take a second to get into the writing. Sam Mariano does not write in third person anymore. This is one of her earlier works, so just a heads up. Next up, a book that I have not talked about in like a hot second, and unfortunately is part of an unfinished duet, The Monster of Hotel Number 7 by K.V. Rose. We have a secret society, and Karia is our heroine. She's kind of the princess of this secret society. She's not really all that involved. She doesn't totally know what they do. She's not in the inner working, and she's always had her eye on Sullen, and he is the son of the former leader of this group. And despite them not having had a ton of interactions, this is her infatuation. This is the man that she wants. Sullen has a few secrets, one of them being Daddy Dearest experiments on him. He is covered in spars? Sure. He is covered in scars and bruises, and eventually he disappears altogether. No one can find him. And she kind of gives up on ever seeing him again, to be honest. But he suddenly reappears in her life when he can't stay away anymore. He ends up bringing her to his secret lair, his lab. I love this mostly because Karia, she comes across a little bit trying to be bad, trying to be out of control for some attention maybe, but she kind of devolves over the course of the book. Her obsession with Sullen, you realized how just absolutely unhinged she is because she will do anything to stay with him. I will say the second half of this book is completely different because they're kind of like on the run. And nothing is safe because they're trying to get away from the secret society. Also, there is no P&V action, if you know what I'm saying, but it is still very sexy. It's a lot of toying, a lot of touching. So there's that. But I will warn you, this is, like I said, it's incomplete. K.V. Rose has yet to release the next parts of this in a similar vein, and one that I kind of hesitate to recommend, only because it's by Marie Anne, and she's no longer writing. We don't know if we'll ever get the conclusion to this series, but this first book's so good. It's Make Me Pretty. This is about Abel and Paris, and Abel has grown up in the foster care system. They're in high school right now. The latest family that he's been with has been, well, I mean, he's had a lot of horrible families. This one's another one that's really horrible. He ends up in the ER. Yeah, it's rough out here for Abel. So he's not having a good time. The nurse that ends up taking care of him thinks he's funny, thinks he's a sweet kid, and ends up becoming his emergency caregiver or guardian. So this seems great. She's so nice. She's so kind. What could be wrong with this except for her son? Her son is Paris, and this is his bully. He's taken a particular interest in Abel for whatever reason and just bullies him ruthlessly. And now, not only is it happening at school, it's happening at home. But the more that they're around each other, the more they realize how many demons they both have. This one is like the definition of toxic. I think this has to be one of the most toxic relationships I think I've ever read. It does also go very hard on some of the kink aspects. It comes about naturally. We're not formalizing agreements of any kind, and they end up doing some messed up stuff to each other. So just like be prepared. Also, both characters have really tough backstories. Also a heads up with that. With all of these check triggers, I mean, it's dark romances. You know the drill. You know what you're doing here. I think the wildest part about this book though is that the bullying, just about the point that you think it's gone too far, you hop into the head of the other character and then realize they're kind of having a good time with it. It's really messed up. I think part of it is Abel has a hard time relating to people because he doesn't really have any good models for what relationships look like, and he's just excited to get any amount of attention. Also, a little bit of self-loathing. Abel is truly one of the most unique characters I think I've ever read, especially towards the end. I feel like he's really blossomed and becoming the person he ultimately wants to be. Like I said, it does leave off on a cliffhanger, unfortunately, and I don't know when the series will be complete. But it's worth the read just on its own. It's really good. Also, the bullying all the way through. Be prepared. Next up, I have for you A Little Unstable by Elle Mitchell. This is on the lighter side. And this is, I would say, more like lightly and realistically toxic. Hopefully that description makes sense. So we have Mila, and Mila moves to this small town in Washington, the high school age. She's never really been anywhere for long periods of time. She doesn't have a lot of roots. And so she's really excited when she pretty much instantly gets along with her neighbor, Tristan. These two are the best of friends until they just aren't. They have a falling out at some point, and eventually Tristan moves away, which is exciting for him because he found the hometown that they were in very suffocating. Did not like it there at all. Always miserable, did not like the people. So great for him. Also great for Mila because she's finally free of Tristan. He was up in her business and causing so many problems for her. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of plot twist. There's a little twist of fate for them. They end up going to the same college. Not only are they at the same college, they end up in the same class because their last names are so similar and start with the same letters. They end up as lab partners. That's right. These two need to work together to get a passing grade. And it ends up reigniting some really old tension and a lot of unresolved feelings that resulted from that falling out. If you know anything about Elle Mitchell, you know she brings the emotion. This lady loves to get emotional, and we've got a falling out, we've got some hurt feelings, we've got some bullying going on, we have a little bit of a toxic relationship. It's really realistic in its toxicity. This is like, when I was reading this, I was like, this is the relationship that you are constantly trying to pull that one friend out of, where you're like, can you just quit him? And they're like, but I love him, I can fix him. It's different this time. That's this type of relationship. Also, this has a very excellent dual timeline that I didn't feel like flitted back and forth at those like crucial moments where you're like, no, just as it was getting good over here, now we're flipping over there. It felt very natural. And also, the way Tristan was written was so perfect. We've got some mental health rep in here, and I don't want to reveal the diagnosis necessarily, but it's pretty obvious very early on that he has something going on. The way he is written is so spot on to how this presents in a loved one that I'm very close with. He presents almost identically to this. And it was wild because even from the first few descriptions of him, I knew exactly what diagnosis he had. It was that spot on. It was that well done. It was truly wild. This book made me so emotional. These characters were so real to me. So real. Highly, highly recommend. Very underrated. Elle Mitchell in general is very underrated. Go read all of her stuff. And if you want something a little bit darker, with a little bit of a murder mystery going on, Carved in Scars. You're welcome. Bonus one. All right, next up, we have, from my girl Liza James, The Madhouse. Once again, warning, this is an incomplete duet. Is that all I'm recommending in this? I need to rethink my life. Why do I love so many books that are I don't want to ask questions. Look, okay, so this is a Lizzie Borden retelling. So we have Cedar and Ophelia, and these two are stepsisters, and they grow up in a cult. So good news is, at 16, Cedar is able to escape. Unfortunately, she is not able to take Ophelia with her. Although she's always tried to go back and find her, she's never been successful. The family just up and disappeared, but she's never stopped looking for Ophelia. Now, Ophelia does end up turning up. Unfortunately, it's not for great reasons. She is being held at a mental institution because she axed both their parents, and they are not among the living. Yeah, but we've got some mental things going on, so she does get released. And now, unfortunately, Ophelia, because she's been in this cult environment, does not know how to adapt and live in the real world. And although she doesn't want to believe all of their religious BS, unfortunately, we got a lot of unlearning to do. Cedar is going to be there to try and help her through it all. So this one is so interesting because we do get like little glimpses into what their life was like when they were in the cult with their family, some of the messed up practices that they engaged in and the messed up beliefs that they have. And because Ophelia was in the cult for so much longer, you see how much unlearning she has to do and how hard it is for her to unlearn that, even though she knew that this was a horrible environment. She wanted out, she wanted to get out. There's still so much unlearning to do. A lot of the religious deconstruction is very realistic. I know Liza James has talked about this is something that she has had to do. So I think she brought a lot of her own experience to this, and you can tell, you can definitely tell. It's also really fun because Ophelia and Cedar, just like having those little moments of Ophelia getting jealous when Cedar is like laughing and hanging out with a friend. She wants to be with Cedar like that. Why is she hanging out with her? The ending on this, huge cliffhanger. So distressing. In my mind, I just pretend that everyone's okay and is living happily ever after. I know that Liza James is working on the second book actively. She's released little snippets of it here and there. So I know the second book in this duet will be coming soon. All right, next up we have Anointed, and this is by Charity B. So this is one that I have not talked about in a hot second, but I adore with every fiber of my being. This was one of those books that immediately I was like, should reread that. Such good character arcs. Okay, so this is about Laurel Ann and Zebediah. We're dealing with another cult. So sorry, friends. So this is sort of loosely a little bit like FLDS and the Amish kind of like had a baby, but it's like a little bit different because there's some other elements to this. This is the symbol for their god, so it's a little bit different. But they're polygamous and they reject modern technology and they live on a compound, so you can kind of get the comparisons. They live entirely separate from the outside world. So Laurel Ann, when she's around like 13, ends up doing a couple of things that they're not that egregious, but because she went against the cult leader, she is kicked out. And she now has to live on the outside, something she's never done. And she does her best to still uphold the practices of the cult. So maybe someday she will be the least tainted she possibly can be, and maybe she'll be able to come back. Eventually, she is able to come back because Zebediah, he is now the prophet. And although she is tainted, he cannot resist her. You've got a little bit of like childhood friends to lovers. There's so much. Both of these two have amazing character arcs. The first like 25%, maybe like the first like quarter of this book is the build up to her excommunication. So you see the relationship between her and Zebediah when they're younger and how much they love each other, but also the dynamics of the cult, the belief system, the families. When she does get excommunicated, she clings to her faith. So you still see it on full display. You see why she's able to go back so easily and desires to go back so much, but reintegration is a painful process, painful process. And Zeb is not the person that she left behind. And so now they have to kind of come together once more and rediscover who each other are. And also the cult has such a profound impact because there's so many demands placed upon both of them. They have to operate within the system that they desperately don't want to, but they still want to cling to their beliefs. Both of them have a lot of demons rolling around. This was a top read of last year for me. I absolutely adored it. Charity B took her time with, like, I wanted her to rush through certain things and just like get to the point, but really she imbued so much into the characters. They were so well developed. The plot was so well developed. The environment of the cult was well developed. There are a few things done that feel like it was done a little bit for shock value, a little bit to be salacious, but a lot of this, I was like, I could see this being real. I could 100% see this being real. So, all right, I'm sorry, it's so dark now. It just started pouring rain. So I'll give you one more in this horrific lighting with you can see my one sad light trying so hard. The last book that I have for you is The Darkness Behind the Daisies by Cory Zahara. This is about Jolie, and she lives an absolutely regular life until she's 18. That is until she is kidnapped and sold. She is trafficked. And a couple, out of the kindness of their heart, ends up purchasing her to be a friend to their son, who doesn't have a lot of people in his life. That's their only request. Please befriend him. The ask really becomes so much bigger than that, because this family may appear normal from the outside, but it's a very thin veneer. So this I will warn you, much like this lighting, is one of the darkest books that I have ever read. And it's made all the darker by alternating between very saccharine sweet moments and very dark dramatic moments. It really provides a lot of contrast there. So the dark parts really feel so much darker. Also, it's really fascinating because this is dual timeline. So you get her when she's in captivity initially. You kind of get lulled into a false sense of security, even though the synopsis says it's a thin veneer and like there's a real different purpose that they've got her for. You kind of forget about that. And then you get to their current timeline and how horrible that is. And slowly that gets better. It's very cool just seeing how she kind of like played with that. I did feel like characters were evil, but I didn't feel like anyone was like truly like mustache twirling. I felt like everyone had like a little bit of a layer to them, a little bit of complexity that really just like gave their character some oomph, where you could kind of see it their way sometimes, even though the action they chose to take, you're like, that's horrible, that I would never do that. And I think Cory Zahara just does a really good job of describing trying to hide pain. And apparently she also has like one of the conditions that the heroine has called maladaptive daydreaming. So I thought that was really fascinating that she was able to incorporate that into the book, because I had never heard of that. I'd never heard of that before. But this does wrap up a little quick, so just a heads up with that. But otherwise, so good. I read this at the beginning of the year and I swear I can recall full scenes from this book still. And also the Amazon edition has really beautiful black pages. It's really, really cool. All right, now that the lighting is absolutely atrocious, those are all the underrated dark romances that I have for you. I would love to know, do you have any underrated dark romances that you would like to add to the collective? I would love to know. Your friends would love to know. Let's get some other recommendations going. Also, let me know if you've read any of these books. Do you love them? What are your thoughts? And with all that, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for putting up with the crappy lighting. Thank you for putting up with my sourpuss attitude while I soldier on through these cramps. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want more content from me. And I really, really hope that I see you on my next video. Bye-bye.